On a stormy evening, a determined young girl named Sofia stands shivering in the rain, selling candies to help her struggling family. A passing stranger, Elon, stops to buy her entire stock, and soon finds himself entangled in their fight to survive. As Elon helps Sofia and her mother, Rosa, rebuild their lives, old wounds and unexpected enemies resurface, threatening to tear everything apart. Can a single act of kindness truly change the course of a family's future? And when faced with challenges from his own past, will Elon have the strength to stand by them? The rain poured down in relentless sheets, drumming against the pavement in a rhythm that seemed to mock the few who dared to brave the storm. Cars splashed through growing puddles, headlights slicing through the dreary haze. At the corner of Bay Street and 12th Avenue, a small makeshift candy stand stood like a fragile island in a raging sea. Underneath a flimsy plastic tarp that sagged with the weight of the water, a girl no older than 10 stood shivering. Her damp curls clung to her face as she called out, her voice thin against the roar of the rain. "Candies for sale! Help my family, please!" Elon, a man in his late 40s with weary eyes and a once-pressed suit now creased from a long day, was waiting at the red light in his car. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour, and the heater hummed warmly, a small luxury he'd taken for granted until now. As he drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, something about the girl's silhouette caught his attention. "Candies for sale!" she called again, clutching a handful of soggy packets against her chest. Elon sighed and rolled down his window, the cold wind biting his face. "Hey, kid!" he called. "What are you doing out here in this weather? Where are your parents?" The girl turned, her eyes wide with surprise, but she didn't come closer. "I'm selling candies! $5 each!" she shouted, her voice trembling from the cold. Elon frowned. The light turned green, and a car behind him honked impatiently. But instead of driving on, he waved the driver around and pulled over. Grabbing his umbrella from the passenger seat, he stepped out into the rain. Up close, the girl looked even smaller. Her coat was far too thin for the weather, and her sneakers were soaked through. "You shouldn't be out here," Elon said, his voice softer now. "Where's your family?" "They're home," the girl replied defensively. "We're behind on rent. Mama says we have to work together." Her words struck him harder than he expected. There was no trace of self-pity in her tone, only a matter-of-fact resilience that seemed far too heavy for her small frame. Elon crouched down to her level. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sofia," she said. "Do you want to buy some candy or not?" Elon chuckled despite himself. "How much for everything you've got?" Her jaw dropped. "All of it? Really?" "Yeah," he said, reaching for his wallet. "But on one condition. You tell me where you live. I want to make sure you get home safe." Sofia hesitated, her small hand tightening around the edge of the tarp. "Mama says not to talk to strangers." "I get that," Elon said. "But I'm not leaving you out here alone. You tell me where you live, or I call the cops." Her eyes widened in alarm, and she shook her head. "No cops." Okay, I'll show you." As they packed up the candy, Elon noticed her hands trembling so hard she could barely hold on to the packets. He handed her his umbrella and carried the sagging stand to his car. Once they were both inside, the heater blasting, Sofia gave him hesitant directions to a narrow, crumbling apartment building on the edge of the neighborhood. The building was as tired as the storm itself, its windows fogged and patched with tape. Sofia led him up a flight of creaking stairs to a door marked 3B. The scent of fabric dye and damp wood greeted them as the door opened, revealing a woman hunched over a sewing machine in the dim light. Her hands moved with a precision born of years of practice, even as her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "Mama," Sofia called softly, holding up the wad of cash Elon had handed her. "I sold everything." The woman looked up, startled. Her medium brown skin glowed faintly under the single bulb above her, and her hair was pulled into a bun streaked with silver. "You didn't," she began, but her gaze landed on Elon, and her words faltered. "Good evening," Elon said gently. "I'm Elon. Sofia and I met at the candy stand." The woman stiffened. "Did she bother you?" "I told her not to." "She didn't bother me at all," Elon interrupted. "In fact, she inspired me." He glanced around the small apartment. The walls were lined with stacks of fabric and half-finished garments, and a mattress on the floor served as both bed and couch. Sofia sat down on the mattress, watching her mother anxiously. "Is this where you live?" Elon asked, though the answer was obvious. The woman nodded, her expression guarded. "It's temporary. I sew for a factory downtown, but the pay's not enough. We're behind on rent, so Sofia tries to help." Elon leaned against the doorframe, his heart heavy. The storm outside seemed to echo the chaos within this small family's life. "What if I could help?" he asked, his voice steady. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Why would you do that?" "Because I believe in second chances," Elon said simply, "and it looks like you could use one." The silence that followed Elon's words was deafening. The faint whir of the sewing machine, the muted patter of rain against the window, and Sofia's barely audible breathing filled the room. The woman's jaw tightened as she glanced at her daughter, then back at Elon. "Second chances?" she echoed, her tone carrying equal parts disbelief and suspicion. "We've heard promises before. They don't last long." "I'm not here to make empty promises," Elon replied. "I'm just someone who happened to stop at a red light and saw your daughter in the rain. A kid shouldn't have to do that, not for any reason." The woman exhaled sharply, running a hand over her face. "Look, I don't know who you are, but we've been through enough. If you're here out of pity—" "It's not pity," Elon interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "It's respect. You're doing everything you can for your family, and so is Sofia. That's something worth helping." Sofia's mother hesitated, the tension in her shoulders slowly softening. She reached over and took the wad of cash from her daughter's hand, counting it with quick fingers. Her face betrayed her relief before she masked it again. "This will cover part of what we owe," she muttered, more to herself than to Elon. "What's your name?" Elon asked. "Rosa," she said finally, looking him in the eye. "And if you're serious about helping, you'll understand that we don't take charity." Elon tilted his head, intrigued by her unwavering pride. "What if it's not charity? What if it's an investment?" "In what?" Rosa asked, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "You," Elon said simply. He gestured at the sewing machine and the stacks of fabric lining the walls. "You're clearly talented. What if you had the resources to turn this into a business?" Rosa stared at him, her expression unreadable. "A business? Do you know how much that takes? Machines, supplies, rent?" "I do," Elon said. "And I also know that sometimes all it takes is someone to believe in you. Let me do that." For a moment, Rosa said nothing. Sofia looked between them, her wide eyes filled with hope and fear. Finally, Rosa shook her head. "I don't know you, and I don't trust what I don't know. Besides, even if I wanted to start a business, where would I begin? I'll help you figure that out," Elon said without hesitation. "This isn't a handout. It's a chance for you to build something sustainable, for Sofia and for yourself." Rosa's lips parted, but before she could respond, a loud knock echoed through the apartment. The three of them froze. "It's the landlord," Rosa whispered, her face pale. "Stay here." She crossed the room and opened the door a crack. A burly man in a leather jacket stood in the hallway, his scowl deepening when he saw her. "Rosa," he said gruffly, "the rent's overdue. Again. I've been patient, but this is the last warning." "I know, Mr. Franco," Rosa said quickly. The landlord cut her off with a raised hand. "I'm done with excuses. You've got until the end of the week to pay in full, or you're out." "I'll have it," Rosa said, her voice trembling. "Please, just a few more days." Franco grunted but didn't argue. "Friday," he said, then turned and stomped down the stairs. Rosa closed the door slowly, leaning her forehead against it. Sofia ran to her side, clutching her hand. "Mama, it's okay," Rosa murmured, though her voice wavered. "We'll figure it out." Elon stepped forward, his expression resolute. "Let me help, Rosa. You can't keep scraping by like this." Rosa turned to face him, her eyes glistening. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know us." "Because I've been where you are," Elon said, his voice low. "My mother worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. I watched her break herself to give me a chance. Someone helped us once. It's my turn to do the same." Rosa stared at him, her defenses crumbling. She sank onto the mattress, her hands trembling. "What do you want from us?" she asked softly. "Nothing," Elon said, just a chance to make a difference. Sofia tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, let him help, please." Rosa looked at her daughter, then at the worn sewing machine in the corner. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said. "But if this goes wrong, it's on me." Elon smiled faintly. "Deal." The next morning, Elon arrived at their apartment with a van filled with supplies, bolts of fabric, a new sewing machine, and a box of business cards with Rosa's creations printed in elegant script. Rosa's hands trembled as she ran her fingers over the cards, disbelief etched on her face. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll make it work," Elon replied. "This is just the beginning." As the day unfolded, Elon guided Rosa through setting up a workspace in the apartment. He showed her how to market her designs online, creating a simple website and social media page. Sofia watched in awe as her mother's dream began to take shape before her eyes. By evening, Rosa had her first order, a custom dress for a local boutique. Tears streamed down her face as she held the request form. "I never thought this could happen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You made it happen," Elon said. "I just gave you the tools." Sofia threw her arms around him, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Elon." He ruffled her hair, his heart full. "Call me Elon, and this is just the start, Sofia. You've got a bright future ahead." The hum of the new sewing machine filled the small apartment, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the hope building within its walls. Rosa leaned over her workspace, her fingers nimble as they guided vibrant fabric through the machine. Her shoulders, once weighed down by worry, now carried a cautious determination. In the corner, Sofia was carefully sorting spools of thread by color, humming a tune under her breath. Elon sat at the small table near the window, laptop open as he helped Rosa organize her first batch of orders. "You've got 4 more inquiries," he said, scrolling through emails. 3 dresses and a batch of aprons for a cafe." Rosa glanced up, her eyes wide. "That many already? Are you sure?" "Positive," Elon replied with a smile. "Word travels fast when your work is good." Sofia beamed. "I told you people would love Mama's sewing." Rosa chuckled softly, a sound that hadn't come easily in years. "You were right, mija." The door creaked open, and a neighbor peered inside. A woman in her 60s with deep smile lines and a colorful scarf tied around her head. "I heard the sound of a new machine," she said with a warm smile. "Rosa, is it true? You're starting a business?" Rosa straightened, pride flickering in her eyes. "It's true, Mrs. Alvarez. I'm making clothes and taking orders now." Mrs. Alvarez clapped her hands together. "Que maravilla! I've been meaning to replace my curtains. Would you be able to sew something custom?" "Of course," Rosa said, her voice steady. "Come in. Let's talk about what you need." As the 2 women discussed fabric patterns and measurements, Sofia sidled over to Elon. "She's happier now," Sofia whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "You did that?" Elon shook his head. "No, Sofia, she did that. All I did was give her a little push." Sofia tilted her head, considering his words. "Still, you helped. Not everyone would." Elon glanced at Rosa, who was now laughing with Mrs. Alvarez as they sorted through fabric samples. A pang of something bittersweet tightened his chest. "Sometime," he said quietly, "people just need someone to believe in them." Days turned into weeks, and Rosa's creations began to thrive. Orders poured in, and the apartment transformed into a bustling workshop. Elon had arranged for a small storage unit nearby to hold extra supplies, freeing up space for Rosa and Sofia to live more comfortably. Even Mr. Franco, the gruff landlord, seemed to soften as Rosa made steady progress on paying her overdue rent. But with the success came challenges. One evening, as Rosa prepared to deliver a batch of dresses to a boutique, the sewing machine jammed. Panic flickered across her face as she fiddled with the knobs and gears. "No, no, no," she muttered, her hands shaking. "Mama?" Sofia asked, her voice small. "It's fine," Rosa said quickly, though her tone betrayed her. "I'll fix it." Elon, who had just arrived with dinner, set the bags down and crouched beside her. "Let me take a look." "It's no use," Rosa said, her frustration bubbling over. "I can't afford to miss this deadline, Elon. If I do, they'll never order from me again." "You won't miss it," Elon said firmly. We'll figure it out. He spent the next hour troubleshooting the machine, his sleeves rolled up as he tinkered with its mechanics. Sofia sat nearby, handing him tools and offering words of encouragement. Finally, with a soft whir, the machine sprang back to life. Rosa let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I would have done." Elon smiled. "You'd have found a way. You always do." That night, after Sofia had gone to bed, Rosa sat at the table with Elon. The light from the single bulb above them cast long shadows, and the rain outside pattered softly against the window. "Why do you care so much about us?" Rosa asked suddenly, her gaze steady. Elon leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Because I see myself in Sofia," he said after a pause. "When I was her age, my mom worked herself to the bone to keep us afloat. I used to sell newspapers on street corners to help out. I remember how hard it was, feeling like the weight of the world was on my shoulders." Rosa's expression softened. "You don't talk about her much. She passed a few years ago," Elon said quietly. "Cancer. But everything I am today is because of her. She taught me to fight, to believe in myself, even when the odds were stacked against us." Rosa reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "She must have been proud of you." Elon smiled faintly, his eyes misting. "I hope so." One afternoon, as Rosa finished packaging an order, Sofia burst into the apartment, her face flushed with excitement. "Mama! Mr. Elon! Guess what?" "What is it, mija?" Rosa asked, setting down the tape dispenser. "I got picked for the school spelling bee," Sofia said, practically bouncing. "The teacher said I'm one of the best spellers in the class." Rosa's eyes sparkled with pride. "That's wonderful, Sofia. When is it?" "Next week," Sofia said. Then her excitement faltered. "But I need a nice dress to wear. I don't have one." Rosa frowned, guilt flickering across her face. "We'll figure something out," she promised. Elon spoke up. "What if we make one together? Rosa, you're the best seamstress in town. Let's give Sofia a dress that'll make her feel like a star." Sofia's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Rosa said with a smile. "Let's do it." That evening, mother and daughter worked side by side, choosing fabric and sketching design. Elon watched from the corner, his heart full as he saw the joy radiating from both of them. The night of the spelling bee arrived, and Sofia stood on stage in her new dress, her curls neatly pinned back. The dress shimmered under the stage lights, a deep blue that made her brown skin glow. Rosa sat in the audience, her hands clasped tightly as she watched her daughter step up to the microphone. The room fell silent as Sofia spelled her final word with perfect precision. A moment later, applause erupted, and Sofia beamed as she was crowned the winner. As they walked home that night, Sofia clutching her trophy, she looked up at Elon. "Do you think Mama and I can really do anything?" Elon smiled. "I know you can. You've already proven it." The days after the spelling bee were filled with a rare kind of warmth in Rosa and Sofia's lives. Rosa's creations was growing steadily, with word of her work spreading across the neighborhood and beyond. Sofia, too, seemed to shine brighter, carrying her spelling bee trophy wherever she went like it was a beacon of hope. But as often happens, life had a way of testing resolve just when it seemed things were turning around. One gray afternoon, Elon arrived at the apartment to find Rosa sitting at the table, her head in her hands. The sewing machine sat idle, and piles of fabric were scattered haphazardly around the room. Sofia, uncharacteristically quiet, was curled up on the mattress, hugging her knees. "What's going on?" Elon asked, his voice cautious. Rosa looked up, her eyes rimmed with red. "The boutique canceled their order," she said flatly. "They said my work was beautiful, but they found someone cheaper. I was counting on that money to keep us ahead." Elon frowned. "That's just one client. You've got others." Rosa shook her head. "It's not just that. The landlord raised the rent, said the building is in high demand." "High demand," she repeated bitterly, gesturing around the crumbling apartment. "It feels like no matter how hard I work, it's never enough." Elon sat down across from her, his expression serious. "You've come too far to let this break you, Rosa." "Break me?" Rosa's voice cracked. "I've been broken before, Elon. I thought this was different. I thought—" She stopped herself, her eyes flicking toward Sofia. who was watching silently from the corner. Elon leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. "It is different. You're not alone this time." Rosa's shoulders sagged, and for the first time since Elon had met her, she looked truly defeated. "I don't know how to keep going," she admitted, her voice barely audible. That night, Elon stayed long after Sofia had gone to bed. He and Rosa sat in the dim light of the apartment, the silence between them heavy. Finally, Elon spoke. "There's something I haven't told you," he began, his voice low. "When I was younger, my mom and I ended up in a shelter after we couldn't pay the rent. She worked every day and I sold papers, but it wasn't enough. We lost everything." Rosa looked up, her expression softening. "What happened?" "A man came to the shelter one day," Elon said. "He wasn't rich, but he owned a small repair shop. He offered my mom a job and helped us get back on our feet. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give us a chance. That's why I'm here, Rosa, because someone believed in us when no one else did." Rosa's lips trembled. "I don't want Sofia to go through that." "She won't," Elon said firmly, "because you're going to keep fighting, and I'll be here to help you." Rosa stared at him for a long moment before nodding. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." The next day, Elon put a plan into motion. He reached out to contacts he'd made over the years, friends, former colleagues, even a few clients he'd helped in his own business ventures. He told them about Rosa's talent and determination, about the little girl selling candy in the rain. Slowly but surely, the orders began to trickle back in, but the biggest challenge was yet to come. One afternoon, as Rosa worked on a rush order, the landlord, Mr. Franco, arrived unannounced. His heavy boots echoed on the wooden floor as he stepped into the apartment, his scowl deepening as he looked around. "Rosa," he said gruffly, "you're late on rent again." "I just need a little more time," Rosa said, standing tall despite the quiver in her voice. "I've got orders coming in. I can pay by the end of the month." Franco crossed his arms. "I've heard that before. You've got 2 weeks. If you can't pay, you're out. No exceptions." Elon stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Franco. I'll cover the rent." Rosa spun around, her eyes wide. "Elon, no, I can't let you." "It's not up for debate," Elon said. "You need time to get back on your feet. This gives you that." Franco raised an eyebrow. "And who are you exactly?" "Someone who believes in this family," Elon replied. "Now, do we have a deal or not?" Franco grunted, clearly unimpressed, but nodded. "Fine. 2 weeks, paid in full. No more extensions." As Franco left, Rosa turned to Elon, her eyes brimming with tears. "Why do you keep doing this? What if I can't pay you back?" "You will," Elon said simply. "I'm not worried." That evening, as Rosa worked late into the night, Sofia sat next to Elon, sketching in a notebook. "Do you think Mama will ever have her own shop?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I think she'll have more than that," Elon said. "Your mom's one of the strongest people I've ever met. She'll make it happen." But Sofia looked up at him, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and determination. "When I grow up, I want to be like her. And like you." Elon smiled, ruffling her curls. "You're already on your way, kiddo." 2 weeks later, Rosa completed her largest order yet, uniforms for a local school. The payment was enough to cover the rent and invest in more supplies. But it wasn't just the money, it was proof that Rosa's dream was becoming a reality. As Rosa handed Mr. Franco the rent payment, she stood a little taller. "Here's your money," she said, her voice steady. "And next month I'll be ahead." Franco took the cash, his expression unreadable. "Good work," he said gruffly, then turned and walked away. Rosa closed the door, her breath catching in her throat. She turned to Elon and Sofia, her eyes brimming with tears. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." Elon smiled. "No, Rosa, you did it." The day Rosa paid her rent in full marked a turning point, but life had one more storm waiting. It arrived not with rain or thunder, but with an envelope slid under the door. Rosa noticed it first, picking it up as she prepared the apartment for another late-night work session. The paper felt heavier than it should have, its contents vibrating with an unspoken weight. She frowned, her name scrawled hastily across the front, and ripped it open. Inside was an official-looking document. Rosa's heart sank as she read the first line. Notice of eviction. The building had been sold and the new owner planned to redevelop it. All tenants were required to vacate within 30 days. "No," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Not now. Not after everything." "What is it, Mama?" Sofia asked, tugging at her sleeve. Rosa folded the paper, forcing a smile. "Nothing, mija. Just grown-up stuff." Sofia didn't look convinced, but before she could ask more, Elon arrived with dinner. The moment he saw Rosa's face, his smile faded. "What's wrong?" Rosa hesitated, but then handed him the letter. Elon scanned it quickly, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "You just got ahead. How can they do this?" Rosa shrugged helplessly. "They don't care about that. They just want us out." Elon's jaw tightened. "We'll fight this." "Fight it?" Rosa shook her head, her voice cracking. "How? We don't have the money for a lawyer, and even if we did, they'd find a way to push us out. People like us don't win these battles." "That's not true," Elon said firmly. "You fought for everything else. You can fight for this too." Rosa dropped into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so tired, Elon. I don't know if I have anything left." Sofia climbed onto her lap, wrapping her arms around her mother. "We'll be okay, Mom," she whispered. "We always are." Elon sat across from them, his mind racing. "Rosa," he said after a long pause, "I know this feels impossible, but I have an idea. It's a long shot, but it might work." Rosa looked up, her eyes filled with doubt and hope in equal measure. "What is it?" "Let's find a place for your business. A real place. If we can secure a shop before the eviction, you'll have something to fall back on." Rosa blinked at him, stunned. "A shop? Elon, that's ambitious," he finished, "but not impossible. You've proven you can handle the work. Now it's time to take the next step." The next morning, Elon began making calls. He reached out to old business contacts, explaining Rosa's situation and asking for leads on affordable retail spaces. Meanwhile, Rosa threw herself into her work, taking on every order she could manage to save as much money as possible. Days passed in a blur of activity, but the clock was ticking. Each time Rosa glanced at the eviction notice pinned to the fridge, her chest tightened. Finally, after a week of searching, Elon found a potential space, a small storefront on the edge of the neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it had large windows that let in natural light and enough room for a workshop and display area. "It's perfect," Sofia declared when they visited the space. She twirled in the empty room, her voice echoing off the walls. "It could be Mama's shop." Rosa ran her hand over the counter, her expression conflicted. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "But the rent—" "I spoke to the landlord," Elon said. "He's willing to give you a discounted rate for the first 6 months to help you get started." Rosa stared at him. "Why would he do that?" "Because he believes in small businesses," Elon replied with a grin. "And because I promised him you'd make this place a success." Rosa laughed softly, though her eyes glistened with tears. "You always make it sound so easy." "It's not easy," Elon said, "but it's worth it." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Rosa signed the lease, and Elon helped her move her equipment and supplies into the new shop. Neighbors pitched in, painting the walls and setting up shelves. Even Sofia got involved, creating handmade signs to hang in the windows. On the morning of the grand opening, the shop was filled with fresh flowers and the warm hum of conversation. Rosa stood behind the counter, wearing a dress she had sewn herself, a deep green that brought out the glow in her medium-brown skin. As the first customers arrived, Rosa's hands trembled, but Elon was by her side. "You've got this," he said, squeezing her shoulder. "They're here because they believe in you." Rosa nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Elon, for everything." Sofia tugged at Elon's sleeve. "Can we put the candy stand in the window?" she asked. "So people know where we started?" Elon smiled. "That's a great idea." They set the candy stand by the window, its bright colors a reminder of the journey that had brought them here. As the shop buzzed with activity, Rosa glanced at Sofia, who was helping a customer choose fabric, and at Elon, who was chatting with a neighbor. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't dared to feel: hope. But just as Rosa began to find her footing, another twist loomed on the horizon, one that would test everything she had built. The shop buzzed with a steady hum of activity. Rosa's creations had quickly become a fixture in the community, drawing customers from nearby neighborhoods and beyond. For the first time in years, Rosa allowed herself to feel a cautious optimism. She'd even begun to envision a future for herself and Sofia beyond survival, one filled with stability, maybe even joy. But life had other plans. It started one afternoon when Rosa received a visit from a sharply dressed man with a leather briefcase. He entered the shop just as Rosa was wrapping up an order for a customer. His polished shoes clicked against the tiled floor, and he wore a look of detached efficiency. "Mrs. Rosa Herrera?" he asked. His tone clipped. "Yes," Rosa replied, her heart sinking at the formality of his demeanor. He handed her an envelope. "You've been served." Rosa stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. "Served? What is this?" "A legal notice," the man said. "The new owners of your old apartment building have filed a lawsuit. They claim you owe unpaid rent for the final month of your tenancy." "That's impossible," Rosa said, her voice rising. "I paid in full before I moved out." The man shrugged. "You'll have to take it up with the court. The details are in the notice." He turned and left without another word, leaving Rosa standing in the middle of her shop, the envelope clutched tightly in her hands. That evening, Elon found Rosa sitting in the shop long after closing time. The lights were dim, and the sewing machine sat untouched. The legal notice lay open on the counter. "They're saying, I owe money I don't have," Rosa said, her voice hollow. "If I can't prove I paid, they'll garnish my wages. I could lose the shop, Elon." Elon picked up the notice, scanning it carefully. "This is a scare tactic," he said firmly. "They're counting on you to panic and settle, but you paid, didn't you?" "Yes," Rosa said. "I gave the landlord cash and he gave me a receipt, but She froze, her eyes widening. "The receipt? It's in a box. I think I left it at the apartment." Elon frowned. "Do you think it's still there?" Rosa shook her head. "The building's been locked up for weeks. They're starting renovations." Elon leaned back, his mind racing. "If we can't get the receipt, we'll need another way to prove you paid. Bank records? Witnesses?" "I paid in cash," Rosa said. "And the only person who knew was Mr. Franco, and he's gone. No one's seen him since the sale." The weight of the situation settled over them, thick and suffocating. Finally, Elon spoke. "We'll figure this out, Rosa. You're not fighting this alone." The next day, Elon and Rosa began their search for evidence. They reached out to neighbors from the old building, hoping someone might have seen Rosa pay Mr. Franco. Most were sympathetic but had no useful information. Frustration mounted as days turned into a week with no progress. Then, just when hope seemed to be slipping away, Sofia came running into the shop one evening, breathless and clutching a crumpled piece of paper. "Mama, look what I found!" Rosa took the paper from Sofia's hands, her heart racing. It was an old rent receipt, but not the one she needed. This one was from months earlier, proof of payment for a previous month. "It's not the right one," Rosa said, her voice cracking. "But it proves you've been paying regularly," Elon said. "It's something." Rosa nodded, though the weight of uncertainty still pressed heavily on her chest. "We need more." 2 days later, a miracle arrived in the form of a phone call. A former neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, had been cleaning out her apartment when she found something unusual. A small pile of receipts tucked into a drawer in the building's office. Among them was Rosa's missing rent receipt. "I knew you'd need this," Mrs. Alvarez said when she handed it over. "Those developers think they can trample over people like us, but they're wrong." Rosa hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means." With the receipt in hand, Rosa and Elon met with a lawyer who agreed to take her case on a sliding scale. The lawyer filed a countersuit, accusing the developers of fraud and harassment. The process was grueling, with court hearings and legal documents consuming Rosa's time and energy. Through it all, Elon remained a steady presence, helping with the shop when Rosa needed to focus on the case and offering quiet reassurance during her moments of doubt. Finally, after weeks of tension, the court ruled in Rosa's favor. The developers were ordered to drop their lawsuit and pay damages for their attempt to extort her. The victory was hard-won, and when the judge's decision was announced, Rosa broke down in tears of relief. Back at the shop, the community gathered to celebrate. Neighbors brought food and flowers, filling the space with warmth and laughter. Rosa stood in the center of the room, Sofia at her side, and raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To all of you," she said, her voice trembling, "for standing by us when things felt impossible. This shop isn't just mine, it's ours." Cheers erupted, and Rosa felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known in years. Elon stood off to the side, watching with a quiet smile. Sofia tugged at his sleeve. "You're part of this too, you know," she said. Elon crouched down to her level. "I just helped your mom realize how strong she already was." "But you stayed," Sofia said, her voice firm. "That's what matters." Elon's heart swelled, and he pulled her into a hug. "You're pretty wise for a kid, you know that?" Sofia grinned. "I learned from the best." As the celebration continued, Rosa caught Elon's eye and walked over to him. "You've done so much for us," she said. "How can I ever repay you?" Elon shook his head. "You already have, Rosa. Watching you fight and win, that's all the thanks I need." Rosa smiled, her eyes shining. "Well, don't think you're getting rid of us anytime soon." "Wouldn't dream of it," Elon said. But just as it seemed Rosa and Sofia's lives were finally settling into a peaceful rhythm, an unexpected figure from Elon's past arrived at the shop, threatening to unravel everything. The knock on the shop door came late in the evening, just as Rosa was finishing a final stitch on a custom gown. Sofia was in the back room, sketching a design for her school art project, and Elon was helping sort fabrics, his easy smile lighting up the space. "I'll get it," Elon said, brushing his hands on his pants as he headed for the door. But when he opened it, the smile disappeared from his face. Standing on the threshold was a man in his 50s, his sharp suit as polished as his piercing gaze. His salt and pepper hair was combed neatly back, and his briefcase gleamed in the light from the street lamp outside. "Hello, Elon," the man said, his voice smooth but cold. "Victor," Elon replied, his tone flat. Rosa, sensing the tension, set her work aside and came to the front. "Elon, who is this?" Victor stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his gaze sweeping over the shop. "This must be the famous Rosa's creations," he said. "I've heard a lot about it." Rosa glanced at Elon, her brow furrowed. "Do you know him?" "Unfortunately," Elon said tightly. "Victor was my business partner, back when I still believed in partnerships." Victor chuckled, though there was no warmth in it. "Come now, Elon. Don't be so bitter. You made your choices, and I'm still cleaning up the mess you left behind," Elon shot back. Victor's smile faltered, and his gaze shifted to Rosa. "And you must be Rosa, the woman Elon has been investing so much of his time and money into. Tell me, has he told you about his track record?" Rosa stiffened. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but Elon has done nothing but help me and my daughter." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Help? Yes, but at what cost?" "Enough, Victor," Elon snapped. "What do you want?" Victor's expression turned serious. "You owe me, Elon. You walked away from our business without settling your debts. And now you're building a new life, helping other people, while I'm left to clean up the financial fallout. I don't owe you anything," Elon said firmly. "You ran that business into the ground with your greed, and I walked away to save what little I could." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You walked away with resources that were meant for the company. I have a legal claim to them, and I intend to collect." Rosa's heart sank. "Elon, is this true?" Elon hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I took what I had earned, what was rightfully mine, and used it to start fresh. Victor's claims are baseless." Victor's smile returned, sharp as a blade. "We'll see what the courts have to say about that." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. After Victor's departure, Rosa turned to Elon, her face pale. "What is going on, Elon? Is he telling the truth?" Elon sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "It's complicated. When I left the business, I took my share of the assets. Victor thinks he's entitled to more, but he's wrong. This is just another one of his games." "But if he takes you to court," Rosa began, her voice trembling. "He won't win," Elon said firmly. "I have documentation to prove I acted within my rights. He's just trying to intimidate me." Rosa crossed her arms, worry etched into her face. "And if he drags you into a legal battle, What happens to everything you've built here? To us? Elon placed a hand on her shoulder. I won't let him ruin this, Rosa. Not for me, and definitely not for you and Sofia. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Victor made good on his threat, filing a lawsuit against Elon and demanding compensation for alleged financial mismanagement. The case became a dark cloud hanging over Rosa's shop, threatening to undo all the progress they'd made. Despite the stress, Rosa refused to let the situation derail her work. She poured herself into her business, drawing strength from the community's support and the determination in Sofia's eyes. Elon, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to gather evidence and consult with a lawyer. One evening, as Rosa and Elon reviewed documents at the shop, Sofia approached them with a small, handmade card. "I made this for you, Mr. Elon," she said, handing it over. Elon opened the card to find a drawing of their little family. Rosa at her sewing machine, Sofia holding her spelling bee trophy, and Elon standing beside them with a reassuring smile. Above the drawing were the words, "You're one of us." Elon's throat tightened, and he looked at Sofia with misty eyes. "Thank you, Sofia. This means more than you know." "You're going to win," Sofia said confidently, "because you're a good person, and good people always win." Elon smiled faintly. "I hope you're right, kiddo." The day of the court hearing arrived, and the air in the courtroom was thick with tension. Rosa and Sofia sat in the gallery, their hands clasped tightly together as they watched Elon take the stand. Victor's lawyer presented a barrage of accusations, painting Elon as reckless and self-serving. But Elon stood his ground, presenting clear, concise evidence that dismantled Victor's claims one by one. His lawyer highlighted Victor's history of financial misconduct, turning the tide of the case in Elon's favor. When the judge finally ruled in Elon's favor, a wave of relief swept through the room. Rosa hugged Sofia tightly, tears streaming down her face. Elon, visibly drained but triumphant, turned to them with a weary smile. "It's over," he said simply. "No," Rosa replied, her voice steady. "It's just beginning." Back at the shop, the community gathered once again to celebrate. Rosa stood beside Elon, raising a glass of cider. "To Elon," she said, her voice ringing with gratitude, "for fighting for what's right, not just for himself, but for all of us." The crowd cheered, and Elon felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. Sofia tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "You're stuck with us now, you know." Elon laughed. "Wouldn't have it any other way." But as they toasted to a hard-won victory, a subtle but unmistakable glint of determination appeared in Rosa's eyes. She was no longer just surviving. She was ready to take on the world. The weeks following Elon's victory in court were a testament to resilience and renewal. The weight that had hung over Rosa's shop lifted, replaced by an air of possibility. Rosa threw herself into her work with a newfound vigor, while Sofia's confidence grew with each passing day. Even Elon seemed lighter, as though winning the legal battle had freed him from a past he'd long carried like a stone in his pocket. The shop became a hub of activity, not just for business, but for the community. Neighbors dropped by to chat, children lingered by the candy stand Sofia had proudly placed in the window, and local artists asked to collaborate on custom designs. Rosa's Creations was no longer just a shop. It was a symbol of hope. But as Rosa and Elon stood together one afternoon watching Sofia help a customer choose fabric, Rosa's gaze drifted to the candy stand. Her smile faltered, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "Something on your mind?" Elon asked. Rosa hesitated before speaking. "The candy stand, it reminds me of where we started, how far we've come. But it also makes me think about all the other families out there, still struggling like we were." Elon nodded, his face serious. "It's hard to think about, but you've shown what's possible, Rosa. You've created something amazing." "It's not enough," Rosa said quietly. She turned to him, determination shining in her eyes. "I want to do more." That evening, Rosa shared her idea with Elon and Sofia. She wanted to start a foundation, an initiative to support families in need, just as Elon had supported her. It would offer resources like sewing machines, fabric, and small business grants to help people build sustainable futures. Sofia's face lit up. "Can we call it the Candy Stand Foundation?" she asked. Because that's where it all started. Rosa smiled, her heart full. That's a perfect name. Elon leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. You're really serious about this, aren't you? I am, Rosa said. I want to pay it forward, Elon, for Sofia, for the community, and for people like us who just need a chance. Over the next few months, Rosa worked tirelessly to bring her vision to life. With Elon's help, she secured funding from local businesses and donations from the community. The first recipients of the Candy Stand Foundation were two women Rosa had met at the shelter she and Sofia had once visited. Both were talented seamstresses, and with the foundation's support, they launched their own small clothing lines. The foundation quickly gained traction, and Rosa found herself invited to speak at community events, sharing her story of perseverance and hope. Each time she stood at the podium, she looked into the crowd and saw faces filled with the same determination she had felt on that rainy night when she first met Elon. One evening, as Rosa locked up the shop, she and Elon stood together under the glow of the street lamp. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from a nearby park. You've built something incredible, Elon said, his voice soft. Do you ever stop to realize how far you've come? Rosa smiled, looking at the candy stand in the window. I think about it every day, but I also think about how none of this would have been possible without you. Elon shook his head. All I did was show up. You did the rest. Rosa turned to him, her gaze steady. You didn't just show up, Elon. You stayed. That made all the difference. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their shared journey settling between them. Then, from the corner of her eye, Rosa saw Sofia peeking out from behind the shop's curtains, grinning mischievously. She's eavesdropping again, Rosa said with a laugh. Smart kid, Elon replied, smiling. She's going to do amazing things. She already is, Rosa said, just like you. As the months turned into years, the Candy Stand Foundation grew, touching lives far beyond Rosa's small shop. Families found hope, children found inspiration, and Rosa became a beacon of what was possible when resilience met opportunity. But for Rosa, the true victory was in the quiet moments. Watching Sofia flourish at school, seeing the pride in her daughter's eyes every time someone mentioned the foundation, and knowing that the life they'd built together was stronger than any storm. One rainy evening, as Rosa closed up the shop, she placed a hand on the candy stand in the window. It was still there, a little weathered but standing strong, a reminder of where it all began. Sofia appeared beside her, now taller, her smile bright. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The candy stand? Rosa chuckled. Not the rain, but the lessons? I'll never forget them. Elon joined them, his umbrella in hand. Ready to head home? He asked. Ready, Rosa said, linking her arm with his. As they stepped out into the rain together, the candy stand glowed softly in the window, a testament to resilience, hope, and the power of never giving up. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to HeroKind Stories and leave a comment below. Share this story with friends and family, because every act of kindness has the power to change a life.